Does this setup look familiar? I just filmed a video here, and I'm losing my voice. That's not saying much. It takes about 10 minutes for me to lose my voice. I'm sure the iced coffee is not helping. I'm making the exact same square that I was in my other video, in case you have seen the other video. So I want to talk about the other book that I read on my Christmas break, listened to. This also came highly recommended by people who are not big romance readers. And to be honest, this book was giving what I thought This Could Be Us would give, as far as like really not being written like a romance. I'll tell you what this reminded me of. It was like an adult version of The Sun Is Also a Star. I know The Sun Is Also a Star is like not the most popular book on the earth. I read it when I was in college, I think. I was like freshman in college. And it was like life-changing for me. Favorite book for a long time. It made me cry. I thought the ending was so good. The book, by the way, which I haven't even said the name yet, is 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. This is the first Tia Williams I've ever read. People have been saying, people who don't read romance who read this, saying, you know, it's deeply romantic, it's about life and growing up and etc., etc. It is a second chance romance. Two people met for 7 days in June, as the name would suggest, when they were 17. And then they meet again 15 years later. And they're both authors, and they've been writing about each other within their own genres for 15 years. The main girl they're 30, I don't know, they're like early 30s. And the main girl has a daughter who's 12. And we have no idea what happened in June. It doesn't even come out until at least halfway through the book. Now this book was nothing like I thought it would be. As far as writing and, you know, the kind of literary fiction feel, it definitely was that. But it wasn't, I don't know. I mean, I did like both the characters. I liked that she was a little bit older or they were a little bit older and she had a kid already and he had other things going on in his life, like this mentorships that he was doing. I liked that they were both writers and that they had been writing about each other. I mean, that is deeply romantic. You know, a lot of the plot, though, kind of hinges on what happened back then. Like, why did they lose touch, etc. Because they lost touch. I mean, it was really just a week. 7 days. Now, what I didn't realize that the 7 days was actually a bender. That's what it was. It was a freaking bender. I have a hard time. Okay, so the reason why I'm saying this is kind of similar to The Sun Is Also a Star is because in The Sun Is Also a Star, they meet, you know, two people who have kind of dysfunctional family situations meet. They spend the whole day together, and they like totally fall in love. And they're 16, 17, something like that. And then they lose contact. And they meet, and you know, that experience like shaped their life. And then they meet again later. Now, in The Sun Is Also a Star, they meet in the epilogue or something. And it's like, they just meet. And that's it. And that's it. But in this one, it's like, it's in the future, and it's like about their lives as 30-somethings, and then we have some flashbacks back to that time. But it did kind of remind me of that because, you know, when you're 17 and you read about like an insane experience of love of another 17-year-old, it is like very deeply romantic. Like, you can imagine that they had such deep emotions, etc. But when you're 28, it's really hard to read about that kind of experience happening to a 17-year-old and relating with it. That was a little bit hard for me because, first of all, the substance abuse was difficult for me to read about. Secondly, if that were me, so say that I had some crazy bender with a guy for 7 days in June and I was like thinking I was in love when I was 17, I would probably end up writing it off later in life. Now, I might be like, that was so crazy, and like, I wonder what they're doing now, and like, wonder where they are in life now, and like, what would have happened if we wouldn't have lost contact. I maybe would be thinking about that, but I wouldn't be thinking like, he's the love of my life, and, you know, I was so heartbroken, and like, you know, the emotions would have dulled over time. And I would have chalked a lot of it up to being like, yeah, I was 17. So it was a little bit hard for me to read about 30-something-year-olds being just as hurt about something that happened when they were 17 as they were the day it happened. So that was a little bit tough for me. However, essentially what happened was like they met and they stayed in this Korean ambassador's house who was not living there. And pretty much were like high for 7 days, and then she overdosed and he called her mom to get her, and the mom called the police. Her and her mom had a really bad relationship, but the mom called the police and he was arrested before she even woke up, and he was gone. And so she thought that he like just left her. She didn't know that he called the mom, nothing. So she thought that he like just abandoned her and was like, oh, I don't want to go to jail again, and like left forever. But he was actually in jail for like years. So it was kind of a miscommunication a little bit. I don't know, well, maybe miscommunication is not the right word, but it was like, I mean, he hadn't tried to find her after he got out or anything, and he probably thought that she knew that he was in jail, but, you know, they meet again at 30-something, and she, like, hesitantly lets him into her life again. He meets her daughter, and then the main conflict is that, which this was a real third act conflict, was that one of his mentees got shot, and he couldn't have prevented it, and in fact he had talked the kid out of going to that place a lot, but he couldn't have prevented it, but the kid did call him before he got shot, when he was like in the situation where he got shot. And the guy was like at a party with the main girl, and so he didn't answer his phone. And so then he's kind of blaming himself, like, if I would have answered my phone, maybe I could have done something, maybe I could have stopped it, which I'm thinking, no, you couldn't have. But I still understand that he was very guilty about that. Anyway, he flew off to see the kid without saying anything to the lady, and the boy died, unfortunately. And then he came back, and then he apologized to the lady. And this was what was really frustrating me. It's like, she did not forgive him. Like, it was a little bit selfish in my opinion. I know she had let him into her life, and it had let, the daughter was there too. But like, people are not, okay, so if I make plans with somebody and I tell my kids too, and then they flake, and my kids know that the person flaked, and then the very next day, or maybe it was like literally later that same day, they apologize and tell me the whole situation. And this situation was that somebody they know very well died, and they were the only person, like they were the only adult in this person's life, and they were a huge, they were really important to this person, and the person wasn't really important to them, and they feel a little bit responsible for what happened. I'm not going to be like, oh, well, but you told my daughter that you would come to brunch. So it's like, okay, get a freaking, like, that was a little bit much for me. I couldn't really take that seriously. So they have like this very, very distant kind of relationship after that, where they like call each other, but they're not ready to be together or something, or she's not ready. And she, like, in the meantime learns about her family and writes another book, I think. And anyway, it was, and then they, they're like, they do get together kind of in the end. So it was kind of up in the air. Like the ending was a little bit ambiguous, I thought. It did leave me thinking, like, okay, why did I read this book? I liked the characters, and I thought I was liking the plot, but once I found out about the like Bender week that they spent together, I was like, this is not really what I was planning on reading. About the self-harm and stuff, it came out of like left field, way, like, pretty far into the book. And so instead of it being about like two authors who've been writing about each other because they met in high school and like kind of fell in love but then lost contact, instead of it being like that, it was like, when I was in high school, I did drugs every single day. I OD'd. I cut my wrists. Etc., etc. Crazy business. And then he was like an alcoholic, even at that age. And I was thinking, like, okay, these people are so messed up. So it was kind of weird reading about them when they were 17 and then reading about them when they were 30 something and like mostly normal. So she had this migraine condition, which that was why she took so many pills. But she had this migraines that were like so horrible since she was a little girl. And there wasn't much conclusion about that. I mean, I know that's how it is. Like, there is no conclusion about migraine conditions, but he was like the only person who cared about her migraine condition or like asked her questions about it or like was concerned about her. So that was really sweet and kind. But, you know, I guess that wasn't enough for her to be like, it's okay that you... I mean, I'm thinking he has mentees that he, like, truly cares about, that he's actually close with, that he actually wants to help, that he actually is helping. And that is a very, like, honorable thing to do. But that kind of counted for nothing in her mind. And I was really glad that he, like, saw her and he told her right away what happened. And I think there's a little bit too much pressure on people these days to, like, communicate instantly. Like, he could have said, like, hey, something came up and I'm flying to wherever, Baltimore or something right now. Sorry, I can't make it to brunch. That is, like, that's such a modern problem. I don't think it's that big of a deal. Sometimes people really can't text or... they don't know what to say. And, like, he did say something by the end of the day when they saw each other. So, to me, it was like, whatever. I mean, is being stood up the worst thing on this earth? I don't think so. So, she didn't have much grace with him. I'm thinking, he was going through a harder thing than you. Being stood up versus feeling responsible for a kid that you know. Death? Okay, those are not the same. So that was a little bit difficult for me to wrap my head around. And the book was very... I've said this in my last like few videos, but I've got to say it again. It was ultra modern. It was the kind of book that, like, there was a pop cultural reference every 5 seconds, and I did not know a lot of them. And some of the things I was thinking, isn't there, like, licensing? I mean, she was dropping so many brands and names and so many things. So it was like, okay, how is this book going to age? And then there was a lot of, like, political kind of talk, and I was wondering how it would age. I wish it would have talked a little bit more about their writing or their writing processes. It was pretty much like a book about two people who have written books, not about two people who are authors. I mean, there was no writing really involved almost in the entire story, so that was kind of too bad in my opinion. But yeah, it was an interesting, I don't know, all in all, I didn't really like it. It was too, like, it was trying to be a little bit too dramatic, in my opinion. Okay, so the bender, her relationship with her mom, which she lied to her daughter about, and, you know, I'm thinking in this whole story, the guy didn't do a single thing wrong, but he's the one who's, like, being blamed. Like, she found out that her mom had pretty much had him arrested that day, and she had spent 15 years blaming him. Then it's like, okay, well, now that turned out to be not his fault at all. And then then she also was blaming him for not showing up to the brunch, which that conflict was so dumb. I wish they would have just not even included it. And it was kind of nice to be like, yeah, these two people who were really messed up when they met before are now pretty healthy people, and they can be together now that they've kind of figured out their problems. Like, he's sober, and she's, like, on prescription drugs for her migraines. But I felt that they were kind of living in the past. I mean, he was such a kind guy, and he seemed to really like be in love with her. But I'm not sure why he was in love with her, you know. The when they were teenagers, storylines like reminded me of Skins. Remember Skins? Gosh, I hated that show. Like when I watched that show, I'd be like, I'm so freaking depressed. Why am I watching this? That's kind of what it felt like. So it wasn't really an enjoyable reading experience. And like I said, the self-harm came out of left field, and I was like, why am I reading this? So read at your own risk, definitely. But to people who read it, what did you think? I think that this book has been doing pretty well, and I hear a lot of people talking about it. Yeah, I wouldn't call it a romance. It was definitely not a romance. Definitely not a romance. And so honestly, in the end, it was like kind of sad. And I ended up being like kind of sad while I was like, this is a sad book. Yeah, I'll read a sad book that has a purpose. But without a purpose, it's kind of like, ugh, why did I read this? You know, why am I reading about, you know, people who are not healed? And I'm just reading about their hard lives and how they are not healed from something that happened 15 years ago, and they're still kind of acting like dumbos. So, oh yeah, let me know what you thought of it. I finished one square, so that was an accomplishment. I'll catch you guys in the next one.